Right, so this is before I froze it. So I loaded it to MIDI, so I've got it on my push, so I can hand play stuff in. It's really important for me to hand play things in. I don't really like drawing on the screen because it feels like the computer's playing the music. I want to kind of get that human interaction into the sound wherever possible. Okay, I'll show you what I did processing wise. So I put a gate on it. There you go. I'll turn everything off. So there's the raw sample, and I've put a gate on it just to kind of like get rid of that noise. So now I've just got that kind of like transient part, and now here we go. I'm going into my rack. So here's a really cool plugin, which I only discovered actually about a week ago. It's called it's like Envelope by Elisa. Because basically, like to be honest, I usually use this machine here, which is a BSS 402 de-esser compressor, and I do all my sort of transient designing with this. But unfortunately, it's broken at the moment. That's one problem with hardware; it's always breaking down. So I was scrambling to try and find something, and I discovered this. And it's basically a transient designer, but you can actually target it at specific frequencies. You've got like 2 bands. So that's without, and that's with. Yes, it's giving it some depth. So it's basically a very, very clever transient shaper. It's without. So you can really like bend and manipulate the sound. Like I say, normally I use hardware compressors to achieve this kind of sound. But right, the next thing I want to show you. Do I put the before or after the compressor? Usually before, because I'm using it to like shape the envelope of the sound. I'm not always putting compression on stuff, to be honest with you. Like I like dynamics a lot, so I tend to use compression more for tone than I do for the actual compression itself. As you can see here, this rack here is pretty much all compressors, hardware compressors. I have a bit of a bad habit for buying hardware compressors. I have tried alloy, but again, like I say, not to sound like one of those boring people, but I tend to stick with hardware mostly. I just like the tactile nature of them and the fact that they're kind of character pieces. Right, I want to show you this secret weapon. Okay, this is quite a cheap plugin. I've been recommending this to everybody. It's not actually it's not really designed for music actually. It's called Enforcer. Now what this does is it adds, it's like a trigger. So if I play what it's doing is it's got a detector and then it's got a synth engine. And what it's going to do, it's going to shape the envelope and then it's going to add a synth engine underneath the original tone. So you can enforce the sounds of things. So what it's designed for, it's in the movie industry where, like, say you've got a machine gun in a movie and it's not really hitting you in the chest. This adds like it almost like generates a transient. It's like a transient synth engine. But you can actually use it to generate sounds as well. But in this case, I'm just reinforcing the kick. See how much weight that's giving it? It just gives it that low end thump. So following that, I'm just taking out some low end. Like if you want massive bass, you do not want anything else getting in the way of it. So I'll always like shelf off the kicks with something like this to get rid of that low end. So if I switch that on, see how much low end is in there? That's where the sub should be. I want to keep the sub nice and empty. I want just the bass to work. Another really good tip, by the way, if you want your stuff to sound powerful, all the elements that you want to be powerful in the track should always be in mono. They should go straight down the center, because if you've got 2 speakers, like speakers are like air pistons, and if they're doing different things, you're going to get weird phase issues. But I am going to talk about phase in a little bit. Actually, I'm obsessed with phase. Okay, and I've just got a little bit of like API EQ, taking out a little bit of low mid range. How would you add low end to work and boomy if the initial sample is weak? Well, first thing I would say is definitely I wouldn't know. I love stereo. I absolutely love stereo, but stereo mono, they work together. So things which are powerful need to be in mono, but then I use like kicks, snares, bass sounds, these kind of things. But then I'll flesh the outside with stereo information. you want to kind of think of like a three-dimensional cube. So, and also one tip here, by the way, if you're looking to clear boominess, it's all about the lower mid-range. Like, if there's one tip when it comes to mixing and you're having trouble with your mixes, and when I do mixing and mastering, I spend most of my time fixing lower mid-range because every instrument overlaps in that area. So if you clean that area out, that's where the big bass is going to exist. It's not that the bass isn't strong enough, it's that normally lower mid-range is getting in the way. So, right, moving along. Oh, yeah, so now I'll take all that off. Oh, that's the bounced version. There we go. Now turn it all off. Right, so as far as lower mid-range goes, it's like if there was just like one tip when it comes to mixing, it's tuning your lower mid-range, doing lots of cuts on your lower mid-range, because all instruments overlap in that area. If you want to get really good mixes, and especially if you want to get really big bass, for example, a lot of people I see cutting the bass at where the fundamental of the kick sits, say 100 hertz, but that's not really the area where the problem's happening. It's actually happening a lot higher in the sort of 300-400 range. If you start scooping things out at 300-400, you're going to get a much cleaner, fatter, direct sound. It happens in all mastering and mixing. I'm finding that people have too much low mid range and a lot of sounds because they all just build up basically. So, right, there's another part to this kick that I've added. I've added gated reverb, which is coming off my Alesis Quadriverb reverb unit. So one thing I'd really like to mention about hardware is that some people think that getting into hardware is really expensive, but it's not. Like, I bought that Alesis Quadriverb for €20 off eBay. So yeah, I don't think I know a single plugin that's that good that costs €20. I mean, they go for about 20 to €50. It's the same reverb that like Aphex Twin or Tekka used to use. So this is what it sounds like with a gated reverb. Okay, so I'm going to move to the snare. Very similar process with the Elisa. So don't filter out all the channels. Just basically remove frequencies from those areas. Like from your. So for example, if you want to separate the kick from the bass, you want to remove low. You want to remove low mid range, like 300-400. Right. This is a bit I want to show you here. Okay, so here's a snare. So I wanted to add some interest to this snare to make it kind of like murky. I'm a huge fan of like dub music. So I've bought like a proper natural spring reverb. And what I've set up on the spring reverb is I'll put a filter after the spring reverb to create this like really weird kind of like submarine scooping kind of King Tubby effect. So let me just play the snare. So that's the normal one, the build recording. And let me add the spring reverb. Check this out. Hear the filter. And I'm just doing that by hand. So I'll bring that in. Listen to how that sounds in context. You got, I was so low just... If I bring it in here. You can really hear the space here. Okay, so I don't really want to get too bogged down into like mixing stuff because I want to kind of get into the exciting sound designy kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do, you're not going to hear this straight away. So I've got something here. You know, it's doing that thing that I was saying about before, you know, messing with the transients and pulling it into like 16s. Can you see how like it creates its own kind of like velocities? But, you know, it's all right, but it's not really exciting me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this through a hardware box, which is like a filter. When I track this, you're not going to hear it. But what you are going to hear, you'll hear it once I've printed it. So I've just got to double check where it is in the patch bay. So Vermona Spring Reverb. Vermona. Okay, so that's in Aux 4 on the mixing desk. So I'm going to send this output out from aux4 on the mixing desk, and it's going to go out to this Vermona filter box. Like I say, you won't hear the effect straight away. Ah, that sounds mental, actually. Right, let me just record that back. So what I'm going to do, this is how I basically work. I start with things, and I send pieces of audio off to all the hardware, and then I track it back into the computer. And sometimes I'll record these pieces, sometimes for up to 6 minutes, or the length of the tune, just jamming. So what I'm aiming to achieve with this, with the filter, is I want to get these kind of like sharp zap kind of sounds. Which so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to the input bus on my computer, so off my mixing desk. So this is going to come in on channel 15. Let's arm that. Whoa, that's really loud. There we go. Right, it's got to turn it down on the interface here. There we go. Oh yeah, and I just want to record this in mono because this is a mono effect. There we go. Right, so I'm just going to do it. So I'm just going to hit record, and I'm going to jam on a bit of gear. You'll hear it once I've finished jamming with it, and you'll see that it's very hands-on. There we go. Right, that'll do. Okay, cool. So now you should be able to hear it. So this is what I recorded. The first bit isn't that great, but it got really good around here. So have a listen to this. There we go. So that's gone for a filter with some really high resonance, and I'm playing with the envelope of the filter. So now if I put that back in with the original sample, I've got something a bit more interesting. So let's bring that back in with the whole track. So let's put that here, and let's take that there. And what I'm going to do is let's just take the interesting bit from the middle here. See what I mean? I love that hands-on kind of control. Okay, let's bring that in. Let's bring out that bass. Yeah, and that's pretty much what I do. I will sort of I'll get the hardware, and I'll just run pieces of audio through all the hardware effects and then track it back. And some pieces of audio will go back through pieces of gear 5, 6, 7 times sometimes, so I get the sound that I'm looking for. A mixture of reverb, filters, delays, those kind of things. Okay, so I've just done a sort of crazy sound effect. Let me just show you another thing which I think is a bit more on the techier side of things. This is kind of sound design and mixing, and this is a point that I really want to use. So I'm going to bring up the drums, just the drums here, and I'm going to show you a parallel chain that I use a lot. Right. So basically, I love distortion of every kind. Sorry about that. Let's bring up there we go. So I love distortion, but the thing is about distortion, what a lot of people don't realize is distortion changes the shape of the waveform. So when you run that in parallel with the original signal, you're actually going to be out of phase. So what you can do is you can actually play with the phase of a distortion unit by inverting the phase, and you can actually treat it like an EQ. And I'll use that to bring out certain textures of certain sounds. Now, my favorite weapon of choice for this is a Sans amp. This is the plugin. So for any of you who are on a PC, this is actually one of the best plugins ever, and it's actually free. If you just type in, Softamp PSA, you'll be able to get this plugin. Sans amps are available for Macs as well, but I don't think they're free, and I don't know who does them because I don't use a Mac. I've actually got the hardware unit here as well. What it is, it's a guitar simulator. So when guitarists in the 90s, for example, wanted to get the sound of a Marshall cabinet in the studio, they would use this analog box. But it's really good for smashing drums. So, okay, let's have a look here. Cool, brilliant. Yeah, Yeah, thanks there for sharing that. Is that Dara? All right, mate. So yeah, what you can do with this. So this is okay. Is that a question? Right. So basically, this is a technique that was it? Sorry, there's a mixer called Chad Blake. He's hands down my favorite mix engineer, and this is his technique. So here's the SandZamp, and what I'm doing, as you can see, this is on Send G. I'm sending certain pieces of the drums into this send. That's what it sounds like on its own. So let's take everything off. What I'll do is I'll only bring in the drums. Let me just turn. See, I've got groups here. I always have everything grouped like buses. What I've tried to do here is replicate how my analog console works. I've kind of like replicated the setup. There we go. Let me just switch all that other stuff off so you can really hear just the drums. The reason this is important in terms of this field recording thing is that this phase flipping you can really bring textures of things out. There we go. So that's without it. Let me just turn it up a lot. Yeah. Can you hear how much fatter that's making the drums? Without. With. And this is what it sounds like on its own. And here's the phase invert. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert the phase. With the filter, I find a lot of fair filters aren't very smooth with the resonance. Do you compress the sound on the way in? Yes, I do actually. I've got a bunch of 1176 compressors there, and that's exactly what I use them for actually. They're really good leveling compressors for tracking. So whenever I do crazy delays or anything that's analog which gets really out of control, I will run it through the 1176s, which just really pushes the sound together on the way in. So absolutely, yeah. And I really struggle with software filters as well. I do quite like the Ableton one though. We did a blind test once with the MS-20 filter and the Ableton auto filter, and you couldn't really tell the difference. So let me just show you what it sounds like when we've messed with the phase of distortion. So I'm going to turn this phase invert plugin. This is just the utility with the phase invert preset, and I'm just going to turn it around. Oh, it's in phase. That's out of phase. You can also play with a track delay as well. And the way you want to treat this is you want to treat it like an EQ. What it will do, it will hype certain frequencies and it will repress certain frequencies. And you can, but if you really want to learn more about this technique, check out Chad Blake drums, and that's Chad Blake with a T on the front. So TCHAD Blake. It's got the best drum sound on the planet, basically, and this is how he does it using SandZamp. And he's actually using a lot of software to achieve it. So if I change a track delay, see how it's changing the EQ? Can you hear how that's like phasing and it's changing the relationship of the sound? So do you always invert phase when do parallel distortion? No, but I do always check to see what it sounds like in phase, basically. I'll do in phase and out of phase, and I'll just choose which one sounds best. And it is very 50-50. If I could put the name in the chat, yeah. You'll find a ton of YouTube tutorials about this. If you're going to learn like these techniques, you might as well learn it from the best, innit? So there you go, Chad Blake. Oh, sorry, I did that. Let me just do that to everybody. Chad Blake. There we go. So for example, yeah, when I'm doing it in hardware, I've got the cable here with the breakout box, and this little switch here flips the phase. And I usually have this coming back in on an aux on the desk, and I flip the phase with the hardware SandZamp, and I'll blend it in very gently back into my original drums, and it just gives you the most monster drum sound. There's nothing else that compares to it. Okay, let me show you some of my... So this is just... What I'm going to show you here is just some of my weird Ox effects that I've created over the years that maybe if any of you are familiar with my music, you might recognize. So this is like a rack that I built ages ago, which is it's built out of some Max for Live devices. So you should definitely go. I'll write this in the chat. So what you should definitely check out. They do some really, really crazy, sort of like Max for Live devices. Right, so check out this. So I've got it on Aux B. Now listen to what happens when I bring this in, and I'll explain what it exactly is in a second. I'm just going to apply it to the kick. Oh yeah, sounds amazing, doesn't it? And I'll do it in isolation as well, so you can hear just the effect. So what this is, it's a granular delay, which is this here. So this is part of a bundle which you can actually buy on the website called Chaos Effects. And what it is, it's a granular delay. And the cool thing is you can automate every single parameter. You can see that as I'm clicking around. All of these can be LFO'd or step sequenced, which is really cool. So it's basically so it's like a delay, but it's sort of being fed from little grains. And then this is going into a granular, I guess you could call it a granular tremolo. So if I turn this off, you can hear just the effect of the granular delay. The cool thing with it is, depending on what you feed it, so the reason I like to feed this kind of Foley field recordings is this is how it builds up its own texture. So that's just the granulite. And then I'm putting tremolo on top of it. Okay, let's check the chat. Oh, sorry. Guys, there we go. So, yeah, it's just twisted metal. Oh, also, in terms of another thing that I really like about this particular effect, and this is something that I gravitate towards a lot, is it's really unpredictable. It doesn't ever do the same sound twice. I love to just put random LFOs just going everywhere. And then what I'll do is I'll print that track once I've kind of got the sound that I like, and then I work with that. Because there's nothing more boring than everything being really static. So to link the step sequencer, you just literally click the parameter that you want to mess with. You open this little window here, and then you just assign it, and then you can make it do like weird stuff. So if you look at the feedback here, it's now going to. I actually made just from this particular sound. So yeah, like I say, but the reason this is important to Foley is that it sounds different depending on what you feed it. So that's something that I quite like playing with. It's about €40, I think, for this bundle. It's well worth getting. Okay, what else have I got in terms of my sends? Okay, there's another thing I'd like to show while I'm here. So just to add random excitement. So again, it's going to be on the drums. So you see these little random glitches that I've got going on. I'm really, really into glitching at the moment for some reason. I'm just like, I'm about to finish my next album. Well, I've actually written 3 new albums while we've been in lockdown, which I'm going to try and put out over next year. And it's all really sort of super melodic, glitchy kind of stuff. Oh, the bundle's called Chaos Effects by Amazing Noises. You should also check out the Amazing Noises website for stuff which isn't Ableton sanctioned stuff. It is definitely one of my most favorite Max for Live developers because it's just completely crazy. Do I use that send configuration on full tracks or only? No, it goes on with the full tracks as well. This is kind of what my session will actually look like. I need to send the chat thing to everybody. Let me just write this in. Amazing Noises. So definitely check out that stuff for manipulating your sound material. If any of you are familiar with my other alias, which I haven't really done much stuff with recently, is Dot Product, which is very sound design orientated. We generate sounds from our own field recordings. We manipulate a lot of that material with like amazing Noises Max for Live devices. So I'll show you my real recent obsession, which is glitching the hell out of drums. And again, I'm trying to be random. So can you see these little bits on here? So to achieve that kind of stuff, you just butcher the audio. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little slice here, and I'm just going to repeat it. So the longer the slice, the lower the pitch. The smaller the slice, the higher the pitch. Cool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to consolidate it. So that's Command J, sorry. So they could command it, put it sort of. Now what I can do is I can just draw a fade on it. And what I'll do, I'll just find little random spots just to put them, you know. I try not to think about this too much. I don't like thinking too much when I write music. I just kind of do stuff till it sounds good. At the same time, I will spend forever on like each individual process. Some of these processes that I'm showing you, I might make them look quite quick, but I spend hours and hours and hours just on like doing one process, which is why I think it sounds super weird. No problem with the repeated questions. It's all good. Can you point where I can dig classic build up KSP sounds like this wide snare sound between the kick? I think I know what you mean, and do you know what? I think I have it in this project actually. Let me just finish this bit, and I think I'll show you. Do you mean those really big kind of like warping metallic kind of sounds, like you get hit and then a big warping kind of noise after it? Is that what you mean? Right, this is so simple. You'll like this. Right. Right, so let's. There you go. See what glitch there. And maybe I'll take this little piece out, and let's put that there, and then I'll do like a little reverse, maybe reverse the audio. I'll basically just chew the audio up, and I'll spend ages on this as well, and I'll just chew the audio to pieces. Maybe you could even like double this up. So with this one, I'm going to change the curve, so it's going to. There we go. I just spend ages doing little edits like that. So, little basic max benefits from track delaying compared to using the sampler's transient time. I'm not sure I quite understand that with the transient time of the samplers. Do you mean the samplers inside Ableton, by any chance? Because to be honest, like I don't really use samplers in Ableton. I use one of those, the EMU E6400 Ultra. I've had that machine for like I've been using these machines for about 20 years. Right, that weird sweeping effect. Oh, so layering two kicks. So maybe a little basic, but what are the maximum benefits of track delaying? So the benefits of track delaying is it changes the phase relationship between the sound. So if you, for example, like I have another issue I have with bass, for example, a lot of the time you might find your kick has actually got and it can be out of phase to your kick. So you just basically experiment. The best way to describe it is just to use your ears and experiment and play with the track delay. And as you play with the track delay, you'll hear things changing. And when you just kind of find sweet spots and everything. I think that goes for everything, just hunting for sweet spots on things. So yeah, treat track delay like a little bit like an EQ. Okay, so that sweeping kind of sound that you were talking about, I actually on purposely created that. So where are we? So right, where did I put it? There it is. Right, so this is well basic. So this is right, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the sound that you're talking about. It is this one here. Right. Oh yeah, I've got to bring in the bus. There we go. So that's in the lead. There we go. That, yeah? Is this what you're talking about? Right, if that's what I think it is, what I'm going to do, I'll turn the plugin off first and then I'll show you exactly what it is. Right, so this is the sound normal. So, and in fact, I will always go for a piece of Foley sound exactly like this. As you can see, I've done the typical time stretching. Then what I've done is that I've isolated the part of the sample that I want. It's almost like a gate, but I'm just picking the part of the sample that I actually want. I don't want that end bit. So if you hear that, let's play it from here, yeah. So if I draw this bit in, so I don't want that bit. Cool, so I just want this piece here. Right, so this is the trick. It's basically Valhalla Shimmer, and it's Valhalla Shimmer with the diffusion quite low down. And so basically the diffusion is treat the diffusion like a release. The release, so the longer the diffusion, the longer the sound. So if I put a long diffusion, it's going to be much longer. Oh, it might help if I switch the plugin on. See, super long. If I put the diffusion down, see, it's really tight. So with this sound, I'm going to have it sort of somewhere here. There you go. Get that tail. And the size, I kind of look at the size as the timing. If you have a small size, it's very quick. And if you have a longer size, it makes the delay of the sound much longer. So I will basically mess with the size to kind of like tune it into the tempo of the track, so I get the sort of vibe I'm looking for. Let me turn it up a bit. So if I change the size, see, it's a bit later. If I use a shorter size, actually, I'm just thinking off the top of my head now. What I might do with this, I might stick this in a send. I'm just trying to think of some interesting stuff to do. Okay, so I'm getting into my flow now. That's all I do. I just start trying stuff out, and then before you know it, I'm sort of going off on one, just trying things. So I just had an idea that I've never done before. I was wondering what it would sound like if I put this on a send. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to put some mad reverb on it. So I'm going to set the mix completely wet, and that send, I'm going to send to it using that same thing. Let's see what this sounds like. Okay, so B. There we go. Let's see what that sounds like. Yes! I would actually say what works the best is clunky, metallic Foley sounds. In fact, to be honest with you, I'm not just saying this to sort of in an endorsement sense, but Revive Archive is full of the kind of sounds you're looking for. So clunky, metallic kind of sounds. What kind of room? So I don't know if Valhalla actually has a room size, sorry, a room type. It's more like, it's basically what a shimmer reverb is. It's a reverb with a built-in pitch shifter. I believe that it was the Edge from U2 that actually came up with it. So U2 have actually contributed something useful to the world, which is quite nice to know. Not just horrible albums. Have any of you ever met a U2 fan? I've never met anyone that's actually likes them. It's really weird. I've asked this question to loads of people. So what we could do is maybe we could add that. Ah, so we have a U2 fan there. Wow, okay. That's the first person I heard of. Interesting. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in another bus here. So I'm going to enable this send. And let's send that to the reverb. I just want to see what this sounds like. It might help if I actually solo that send. So what's that? Send E. Whoa, cool. Let's see what that sound would sound like going through that really crazy granular thing that I did. So this is what I'll spend my days doing, just experimenting and trying stuff. And basically what I'm doing here is exactly how I would do it in analog. So let's have a look. Oh no, it needs to be send C, isn't it? There we go. Is that playing? Bloody hell. That's pretty crazy. How crazy that sounds. And do you notice it's different every single time? So I'll keep the original sound as well. Sometimes I won't know, to be honest with you. So for example, what I might do is I'll set up a channel with a resample. So what I'll do is I'll set the input to resampling. A lot of what I do in terms of sound is just jamming. I will probably, so for example, I'll do this. I'll show you. Like, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the, where did I set that? Okay, set this input to resample. Right, I'm going to arm it. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to mess around for a little bit and record it all in. And then I can then play with the audio. The problem with this sound is it's going to be different every time. Right. There we go. So there you go. I was just playing with the feedback on the delay there, and then now I've got a piece of audio. So now I can do even more stuff to it. Maybe I'll send it out to a piece of hardware and chew it up more. Actually, I might show you one other thing as well in a sec. Okay, so there you go. I've got the audio now. So now I can do further effects with this. I could, I could do anything really, and yeah, this tends to go. Oh yeah, those glitches is coming from the it's coming from this called fast stuttering, which is like a granular. It's like a granular cutting, like a tremolo, but it tremolos in a really weird way, and it's very random. I love things which are random and don't repeat themselves. I wanted to show you one device that I'm really into. Well, a couple of devices actually. Right, so on this thing there was a vocal. Let me just move this here. At the end of this phrase. Oh yeah, so I was messing. Okay, I can go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here. So hear these sounds here. This was some background noises I was messing with. Well, I better disable some of these. They're going mental. Right. Right, so looking for these birds. In fact, I was really glad when I was going through the archive, I saw some birds in there because I love messing with birds. Not in the English variety. I think some of you know what I'm talking about. There we go. So I've added a beat repeat, and I've also added a granular. Like I don't even know what to call this. It's sort of like this is another amazing noises device actually called Grain Caller, and it's like a mixture of beat repeats and like a granular cutter, I suppose. And then I've got that going for a massive reverb as well. There you go. So it's just making the birds sound sort of like super alien. But there was this really cool voice at the end of the phrase that I was really into. I really liked that, but I wanted to do some more with it. So what I did is I took it on its own. Right, so what I did is I've got this little device here. This is a little granular sampler called a Bastille Micro Granny. They're about 180 euros. And they're mental. It just chews audio up. So what I'll do is I'll always record into it just off the speaker. So I'll basically play the sound. I'll hold it to the speaker. I'll just record it in. Now I should be able to play this to you through an input. So if I make a channel here. Okay, so we'll call this like Micro Granny. Okay, so I'm just going to, okay, so that's going into input 1 on my sound card. So select input 1, arm it, and so now I recorded this earlier actually, so you should, is that actually doing anything? No, it's not actually doing anything. So input, output. Why am I not hearing anything? Oh, that's annoying. So basically, the way I look at this is like, do you know those granular things I've been messing with? This is like a hardware version of the Max for Live devices, basically. It does exactly that. Some of that metallic shimmering stuff that I do it a lot with this. It's just like runs on batteries. It's really cool. I just don't understand why I'm not getting any audio out of this. It's just not sending anything. If not, I'll just move on really quickly. Maybe I could do a couple of questions, actually. I kind of had a plan for this, and I just sort of ended up going off on one. So imagine, sort of, I see time is ticking a little bit. So yeah, maybe I'll put this out to you for some questions. At the moment, I'm using a lot of beat repeat. Yeah, in fact, I've built a special rack unit. I don't know if you could see that when I use the. Where is it? The recording. There we go. Is that it? Where's that recording? I've basically built a little. I'm always like building little racks just for fun, like weird little devices. Let me just try and find. There we go. See, can you see that it's inside a rack? So here I've got a button, and I'll just move it around. And it becomes quite random. I quite often assign an LFO to that, and then it just starts randomizing. So you can see it just randomizes. That's how I use it. But I usually track it. I set it up to work quite random, and then I print it, and then I'll then further edit the audio. Yeah, 10 minutes or more so. I'm quite happy here doing stuff. So, do I use arpeggiators in my productions? In fact, let me show you something. I actually started an idea yesterday that didn't fit this particular track, which actually uses arpeggiators. So this is a melodic idea, because what I'm kind of showing you here is quite rhythmic, but I do a lot of stuff with melody as well, especially recently. So where the hell is that arpeggiator thing? Don't say I've deleted it. It was in this section here. Let me just quickly flick through. I've been a little bit unorganized at the moment. So I do use arpeggiators a lot on synths. And then usually what I do is I map the arpeggiators with CV gates from like sequencers that triggers like random things off the synthesizers again to create like super random things. See if I can find this. I actually used a sample in the granular synthesis way. Where the hell is it? Maybe it's in the scrap folder. Let's have a look. Ah, there it is. Right, so here's like a melodic sequence that I made. Where do I drag that there? Is it highlighted? What the hell am I doing? Okay, I'll just do it from here. So here's my MIDI. Oh no, that's my MIDI. So you can see it's like a chord. So I'm just going to give this a play. So it's in the sampler. So again, I did a granular synthesis thing. I just took a really small chunk, a tiny little piece of audio from... So this is the original... Oh, here's the original audio. It's just a bit from some... Oh no, that's not it. That is not it. It's more like some crazy like droning thing. Show in browser. There we go. That's it. So that's the original. It's just like some noisy church bells. Then what I did is I put a tuner straight after the sampler, so I was able to tune it into C, into middle C, so I know that it's in key with the rest of my track. In terms of synthesized sounds, how do I create variations to keep interesting in melodies? Yeah, so actually I only own one synthesizer, which is this. It's a Dreadbox Erebus 3. I love it so much that it stopped me buying any other synths because I love it. It sounds so good. Any other synth I listen to just doesn't sound as good as this. So to add interest, what I do, because this is a semi-modular synth, I use this Korg SQ1. I didn't actually buy it. Someone just left it in my house and and then they moved away and they never asked for it back. And it was sat in my box for years. And then I set this to random. It's not on it. This into Patch Bay, and it just randomizes functions. Quite often I'll put it on the filter, and I've actually tried to replicate it in software here. So as you can see, I've got this LFO, and this LFO is set randomly. So as you can see, it's set to 1/8 time, and the arpeggiator is also set to 1/8 time. So what's happening is the filter is getting a random value every single time. And then I'm just at it again. I seem to be obsessed with granular noise stuff today, actually. I'm not always this obsessed with granular, by the way. Just this is how it worked out today. There you go. Let's turn that off. See, it's giving you different like filter settings. So There you go. I've also added a little bit of a filter envelope to it as well to give it like a plucked kind of sound. And then when you add delays to that, I'm going to put a delay on here. Is that from G? Yeah. So that's like a super weird delay. That's coming off of this, which is anything by Eventide is amazing as well. If you want to do really good sound design with your samples or your synths, definitely look into Eventide stuff. It's amazing. In fact, I've got a lot of Eventide hardware in the studio. This really reminds me of this box that I use here, which is a Bastille Thyme, which is just a crazy delay where you can modulate all the different parameters. So what you're getting is, because the filter's going random, the delay is also catching random filters, if you see what I mean. It's catching, like, sometimes it's bright, sometimes the note isn't bright. And then you get these beautiful evolving melodies. Because, like I say, like change, things which move and evolve keeps your interest a bit longer than this kind of like static kind of sound. And I mean, that's another reason I like Foley so much, because Foley is always evolving. It's not this static sound. So, drum caller. And yeah, and you can apply that to anything. So yeah, while we're still here then, has anyone got any questions? Like just anything that you want to know? Plaid vibes, yeah, I love plaid. Absolutely love plaid. This is actually, I stole this MIDI from one of the tracks off my new album, actually. I built a whole track around that particular melody, played off the Erebus. I can't get over a creative block when it comes to arpeggiators, because sometimes the phrasing, because of some same phrases every time. Yeah, maybe like the best thing you could do is maybe put like oh, do I use widening techniques? Oh yeah, I'll go into that in a sec actually. A lot. I'm very obsessed with stereo, which also means I'm obsessed with mono as well, because you need both. But yeah, like the thing is, when it comes to arpeggiators, I personally find, I'm not a genius with arpeggiators, but I usually find it's to do with the chord structure. Because obviously, if you have 3 notes playing, you're going to get you're going to get 3 notes after each other. But when you add these little phrase notes in here, see, just for this moment, you're going to get 4 notes playing. So 4 notes are going to jump, and then here it becomes 5 notes, and then it comes back down to 3 notes, and then so on and so on. And it generates these like really, really cool kind of like evolving melodic ideas. I can basically, with a pad like this, I could pull an entire track out of just that one particular piece of MIDI. You could turn into a pad and all that kind of stuff. And also try some like LFOs and stuff to add some random stuff to your arpeggiators is really good as well. Right, widening. Oh, fucking hell, wedgies. This is a huge subject. It's a little bit like how do you speak French in 5 minutes. Okay, so for widening, recently I'm quite into just, so basically the key with widening is it's a thing called the Haas effect. So if you got a sound coming off the speaker and then the other sound is slightly different, it will instantly widen and the center disappears, so it doesn't become mono anymore. It just becomes super wide. And the way you can achieve that is it's such a big subject, it's quite hard to sort of distill it into one thing. I do use widening plugins sometimes, but it's like everything. I use multiple tools to create multiple outcomes. So I'll widen one thing with a plugin, and then I'll try the thing with the Haas effect. So the thing with the Haas effect, do you remember earlier that I don't think this came through? So see this hi-hat here? This is really wide. So this is originally a mono sound, but because each sound is, the sound source is slightly different. Well, let's collapse that. So if you see the start point of this one starts there, but you go to this one, it starts there, but when you put them together and pan them hard left and right, can you hear that, how it's super wide? Yep, I absolutely use stereo enhancers and MSEQ as well. I use everything. I tend to use one thing once, and because I've used it once, I'll then use something else to generate the sound. Right, phase issues usually encounters when you deal with delay. So this is why I'm doing stuff like this. As long as you're not doing it with delay, you're not really going to get phase issues, but you should always double check your phase issues. If you go to my output here, you can see that I've got mono switches, so I can go, and on my mixing console I have a mono button as well. So yes, there definitely is stereo enhancers can cause phase issues, which is why you just have to double check all the time, just to check that it doesn't sound weird. I would say that if you're having problems with phase, the biggest problems where you're going to find them is actually soft synthesizers. These companies, they don't care if what they give you sounds good. They just care to sell units, and people love stuff that sounds wide because it sounds big. So what they do is they invert the phase on one side. So when I'm doing mixing for clients and sometimes mastering, um, I'm noticing I'm having to invert the phase on one side of the speaker on certain instruments because these plug-in companies are flipping the phase to give you stereo width, which is really bad when you collapse into mono because the sound effectively disappears. When you're mastering, this is terrible because you've only got a stereo file. You can't isolate the synth to flip the phase. So you have to start doing some really, really hardcore MS tricks to try and get the pad sound to come out, for example. Um, Basically, MS is if you right, I'll be really honest with you. Yeah, when it comes to stuff like this, I don't mean it in a bad way, but I would say when it comes to mixing and this type of stuff, is don't overcomplicate it. The majority of mixing, and I'm obsessed with mixing. It's my first love. Is yeah, just don't overcomplicate it. Keep things simple. So it's very rare that you need an MSEQ. When I do, it's usually because there's like a synth that's quite wide, and I just want to bring the edges out. But I want to leave the center alone because maybe it's got like a really nice mono snare, which is occupying the range really well, and I just want to bring up the sides. But 9 times out of 10, just a basic EQ, a nice reverb, and a compressor can get you really far with mixing. I would say that I would focus on volumes. Like volume is everything. I reckon I could do a pretty good mix just using volume alone, just getting the feel for the volumes. If you can get your volume structure down, all these other things are just they're just window dressing. You know, there's little techniques to kind of help you where you want to go. So don't let. I've noticed in the YouTube world, there's a lot of white noise. You know, of like you need to do this and you need to do that. And sure, these techniques exist, but they're not used 99% of the time. If I'm brutally honest with you. Um, is it a good idea to use plugins like chorus in parallel? Yep, that's a really good idea. So you could do one sound that's widening it in chorus, then you could do another sound which is using a widening plugin, then you could do another sound which is using like some kind of like Haas effect, kind of hard left, hard right thing. You know, so and then you just use lots of different techniques to build up like a really interesting palette. Um, oh, different people submitting answers for this, but submitting pre-master. Do I ever do processing? So when I'm saying processing the master, do you mean when I send my stuff off to get mastered? Do I ever do anything on my master bus, on my mix bus? Is that what you're asking? Yeah, actually, I do. I'm a massive fan of the SSL bus compressor, which is famously known as the glue compressor in Ableton. There's something really magic about the SSL bus compressor. It just tends to like it's almost like a mixdown button a little bit. It just kind of brings everything together, glues the sound, and then sort of further enhances it. In fact, I've actually got a hardware one on order right now, which I'm really looking forward to get. Yeah, I don't hit it too hard. I usually hit it about -2 dB. I never really hit compression particularly hard unless it's in parallel, usually just 1 to 2 dB. Um, so yeah, 1 to 2 dB with and I'm just trying to push the sound a little bit together to make it sound a bit finalized. I think is the best idea. And if I'm mixing in the box, by the way, I'll probably use maybe like a tape emulation plugin on the way out as well, and maybe like maybe some kind of saturation on the output as well, just to bring out certain harmonics, which brings out certain textures. So is -18 too much in terms of don't get me started on -18. I'll be here all day. I militantly work, but only when I'm in the box at -18. But I need to be very careful here because this could send us down a rabbit hole that could go on for hours. You can actually see my -18 thing here. Where is it? Yeah, so I've got a level meter here, which is calibrated to -18. So see here, it says -18, and I'm actually checking. So let's see. As I go from plugin to plugin, what I'll do is I'll try to volume match. I'll try to volume match the inputs and the outputs of all the plugins. So the volume going through all the plugins is consistent all the way through. So when I turn plugins on and off, the volume level is unaffected. So effectively, when I'm mixing the box, I very rarely touch volume faders. Although this doesn't apply when I work in analog because analog is already -18. So that doesn't need to be. The main reason I do this is calibration for your ears. It basically means that when you turn things on and off, you're actually hearing. So, for example, say a compressor, you're not hearing the makeup gain affect the sound. You're just hearing the natural raw audio. So as I turn the plugin on and off, the volume's exactly the same. So I'm making better judgments. Same with EQs, same with reverb, same with everything. So everything's being volume matched constantly throughout the entire mixdown process. But when I'm mixing an analog, that doesn't happen because it's not easy to. I'm volume matching by ear using the gains on the outputs of the gear. So this particular technique has nothing to do with phase. This is just to do with like volume. The other reason you do -18 is a lot of plugins are calibrated to have their sweet spots at -18. It just means it's how hard you hit the plugin. So it's calibration for your ears, but it's also calibration for your software as well. So plugins like Slate Digital, for example, like here, if you read the manual and Waves, let me show you something. This will shock you. Right, I'm going to put a plugin on, yeah, and I'm going to hit it harder than -18, and you're going to see what happens. And this is horrible. Actually, I haven't showed this plugin. If there's one, you should definitely buy this plugin. It's so cheap as well. It's one of the best plugins ever. It's called Strip Bus. If I do mixing in the box, I always use this plugin. And it's cheap as hell. There we go, Strip 3. I actually got this tip off of Tech Itch. I lived with Tech Itch for a little while. He uses all his tunes. He'll absolutely crucify me for telling you that because he was like, keep it a secret. But I don't think there should be any secrets in music. Share the love. Right. So if I move the level meter here, so let's check it. It's coming in at -18. Yeah, it's a little bit over, but a little bit over is fine. Right, so what I'm going to do, right, when I push this gain, what's going to happen is that the gain level is going to increase, but the volume's going to stay the same because I've got these utilities set opposite on the end here. So it kind of does this. So the volume's going to go up, but only between these, right? So you're not going to hear the volume. You're just going to, the volume going to the plugin is the only thing that's going to increase. Now check out the sound quality. There you go. Can you hear how the sound quality is not as good? It's because the plugin's basically overloading, and you don't even know it, and that's why you do -18 because the plugins just can't handle that level. It's like overdriving some analog, but the problem is analog has a bit of a buffer where it still sounds good, whereas digital, it's like there's a brick wall. Although I don't think there's any harm in distorting digital as well. I mean, look at Nine Inch Nails, distorts the crap out of digital. It sounds great. So, I mean, there is no rules. If it sounds good, it sounds good. You know, that's the main thing. So we're jamming along right now. So we stop at 1400. Yeah, that's cool with me. Yeah, I'm all good. Kind of moved on away from field recording to mixing. Yeah, that's true actually. Can you show Ableton Maps selection of macros for that utility rack that you're using? Yeah. There we go. Looks like that. I don't know if you can do a screenshot or something. Okay, so we've got sort of just like 3 minutes left. Is there like a sound design one sort of sound design question maybe I can answer while we've in this sort of like last 5 minutes? How do I work on my bass lines? Oh yeah, using operator. Admittedly, I don't really use operator so much these days. I'm mostly doing all my basses by generating tones from the Erebus or the 303. And I basically record it into the EMU sampler, and then I just mangle the absolute living hell out of them using the EMU. I do a lot of distortion techniques. I've got like a whole table of distortion units just here, like about 5 distortion pedals. And I will just start messing with the gain stage and the distortion to bring out certain noise characteristics of the bass, and then resample back into the EMU, retwist, resample. That's kind of how I do bass lines nowadays. And is it on the operator? What about effects? Favorite chord setting the EMU? I just use LFOs, to be honest with you, like LFOs to filter, a bit like Optical does. I'm basically like, I completely copy Optical. Anything I can find out about Optical, I'm like, right, I'm doing that as well. Can I recommend a compressor? I just want to say a very quick disclaimer, by the way. Compressors are very overrated. Like, compressors are actually really boring. They don't do a lot. Like, I wouldn't get too obsessed with them as I sit here with a rack full of them. Probably the most versatile compressor is either a distressor or an 1176. 1176s are amazing. They can literally just do everything. But I wouldn't say compressors are exciting. They're not going to make or break your tune. You can do great stuff without a compressor. I went without compressors for years. Most of the Raiden stuff that I made didn't use any compression at all. It's only recently I'm starting to use compressors. I like sound design tools more. Is there any particular hardware software you would use while recording Foley transients? I would say that a Foley transient exists in nature, so I think it's just a case of recording stuff and then going through the audio and just looking at the waveform and just seeing where those things are sticking out. Just use those. Again, I wouldn't overcomplicate it. Just keep it quite simple. And distort rides using subfrequencies. Sending the ride and the sub into a channel, and then just basically driving the channel. It makes the hats distort on top of the weight of the bass channel. That's a really classic technique that in a drum and bass world that Conflict Kamal used to do. He used to drive all of his hats into his bass bus, and then it'll crush everything together. But you need to add gain. You could achieve the same thing with Ableton Saturator by putting the two together. Right, cool. Maybe I'll just do one more question if that's cool, and then we'll move on. We'll finish. So maybe something sound design or sound design. Did answer this. I did answer. Oh, never put reverb on the master. I love reverbs, by the way. If anything, don't worry about buying a compressor. Buy a killer reverb. Buy something like an Alessis Quadriverb or something. Brilliant sound design tool. You can just do amazing stuff with reverb. Before you buy a compressor, buy some sound design tools like reverbs and filters, distortion pedals, and run all your samples and all your sounds through that gear. Worry about compressors much later. I would say. Oh, Eventide Ultraverb, amazing. Absolutely love the Eventide Ultraverb.
All right, I'm gonna cut in.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Chris. I know you have decades of knowledge to share with everyone.
Mate, I could be here till next week. Once I start, I can't stop.
Well, if you wanna plug, you do offer mastering and mixing classes. That's right.
Here, it would be quite good to mention. I was thinking of doing. I haven't actually publicly announced it yet, but I was thinking of doing a thing where I wanted someone to send me a mix, and I was going to do like a Zoom conference, and I was going to do a mix down live, but I'm going to do it all in software. So if you want to do about mixing stuff, I was thinking about doing like a Zoom conference where I'll actually mix a tune live in about 3 hours, and I'll go through the whole process. So let me know about that.
All right, people can stay tuned to your, I guess, Facebook or whatever to hear more about that.
Exactly, yeah.